and we're with my buddy Jeff Hansen, who, interestingly enough, he lives half the time in Orlando, Florida, and the other half of the time about a mile from where I'm sitting. Well, 5 miles from where I'm sitting. Okay, I embellish a little bit, but it makes it easy to grab
Not too
lunch with
far.
my buddy Jeff. Jeff and I have known each other for about really 2-3 years, and we've gotten to be. I consider Jeff a close friend. To the point where we've invited Jeff, and he's accepted to be the chair of our advisory board here at Mobius. So he works with us on our consulting practice and works with us in our healthcare practice and our guest experience practice, and does a lot of advising. He uses a quote that he points out. I don't want to steal all of his thunder, but one of his favorite quotes is one that's used by General Clark, who is he's the commandant at
Superintendent, 3-star
superintendent where
at the Air Force Academy
in Colorado.
And Bob, I'll stop you for a second. He is retiring, and he's about to be the chairman of the NCAA football selection committee. So he will definitely be a force in the room for that this coming year.
Ooh, tickets.
Yeah, he has no one asking him for that, I'm sure.
Sure. Well, in any event, though, the quote is, and I'll quote it if you don't mind, and then we can embellish on it when we get to the point in our discussion. If you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I know, Jeff, I know you well enough to know that you really believe that. And your life and career starting out as an officer in the United States Air Force, I mean, it has to prove itself out.
It does, and it started with that, and a lot of my friends would tell you that that's not hard for me in a room to find. A lot of people smarter, but I take that as a point of pride. It's that to me is it's the right room, right? It's where you should be. It's where the best work can get done. The last thing you want to be is the person in the room saying, well, thank God I'm here. We can all move forward. You want the room saying, I'm glad you're here, and now we're all going to get there together. But that started early. There's, when you are an Air Force Academy grad, you tend to have a stigma that follows you into your first role. They call us ring knockers in a lot of cases, because there's this impression that you're going to walk in and assume that you're the smartest person in the room because you were told for 4 years that you were groomed to be that. I had the very fortunate situation that when I graduated, my dream sheet, the way it works is it's really interesting. It's very different from coming out of Purdue or a Florida State, two of the other schools I was very, very interested in. But you don't interview, you literally fill out a form, and there's 2 sections to the form. What do you want to do? Give us the top 3 to 5 things you want to do, and where do you want to go? Give us the top 3 to 5 things, and then we're going to tell you what you're going to do and where you're going to go when you graduate, and we're just going to take that under advisement. So thanks for the dream sheet. I didn't put much on there. I put finance and I put acquisitions. Those are the 2 major. If you're not going to be a pilot, those are the 2 major opportunities. And I put overseas, and that's it. I didn't put anywhere else. And I don't know how. Somehow I got to a very coveted role in Germany for my first assignment, which was one of the only I was one of the only ones to get that. I still don't know why, but it definitely shaped my career, because you're 23 years old and you show up in Germany during the Bosnian conflict, where you're the operating base that's bringing everyone in and operating actually in that theater. And you've got a team of 15 finance experts that are running this operational base, and you're their boss. So the last thing that you should be doing is walking in the door and saying, good thing I'm here. Now we can all do this the right way. You walk in and say, who's the smartest person here? Help me. Right? You have to have that humility when you walk in the door, and realize what your job is. Your job as a leader is, what do you need to get your job done, team? And then find the people that can teach you how to be better at it. And I spent 3 years going downrange, spent 3 years absolutely loving everything that I was doing, but also learning. The fortunate side of my job was I was overseeing all the resource advisors. And what that meant was I had civil engineering, operations, logistics, all of the major operating portions of an Air Force base, and you had the checkbook. So you had to very quickly learn how an organization works, that you can't launch the planes without the parts for the planes that come from logistics. You can't launch the planes in working order without pilots that have a good home to live in, without buildings that can support all of the teams that have to be there. So while you don't have the P of the P&L, you have all of the expense of a $1 billion operating base that all has to operate in a symbiotic nature in order to get the job done, and lives are at stake. So to have that as my very first role has absolutely shaped everything I've done since, because it leads to that. Don't be the smartest. You're never going to be, you shouldn't be the smartest person in the room. God forbid you think you are. But what a great room when everybody is rowing towards in the same direction, right? And working towards the same goal, and all have skills in all these different areas to get it done. And one of
It
the, I didn't know if this, what's that?
almost sounds like it goes out the back door and into that other famous quote, "The paranoid survive."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was going to the other one that that I didn't know if that's where you were going to lead, which is one of the things we also come out of the academy with, is we are so well-rounded, we're pointless. And we jokingly would say that because when you graduate, you have at least one major and 5 minors, and you also have the military applied arts and science background. You have all these different things you've had to cram into 4 years. What do you do with it? And when you don't leave and you become a pilot, or if you don't leave and become a lawyer, and you don't leave and become a doctor, you're a generalist. But to me, that's been very, very fortunate, because I'm able to go into a situation and say, all right, what are we doing here? That, okay, well, I've got enough of that to ask the right questions. But mainly go back to what we were saying earlier, go in and find who the expert is. Who's the one that's really gotten you here? Or behind the scenes, there's always that person on the team that's like, real quick, here's what really is going on. And ask all those questions. And that's where the well-rounded, that's so too well-rounded or enough to be able to understand any room you're in, to find those people that can get you there. And that's what I've always enjoyed. I love that.
Institutions like the Air Force Academy, and as you know, I went to a different school about 2.5 hours north of here. And
I've
when
never
you
heard this, Bob.
when you
What,
yeah, sure. I
where's the
almost wore
school
the
of North
school
Indiana?
colors
Okay.
today. I almost wore the school colors today, but
Would have been a
the
short conversation today, Bob.
well, I remember when I did visit, well, they all have their own, it's a real feeling. I mean, tradition, when you go onto a college campus, you feel it, I mean, it's not just looking at buildings. There's a mystique, there's a real culture to it that you quickly absorb. And I remember at the Air Force Academy, I saw a quote by, I think it was Doolittle, where and it was very prominently placed, where he said, the next war we fight should be from the neck up, not the neck down, which, that tells a story about the intellectual value of what the Air Force Academy brings to its cadets. At Notre Dame, of course, we have Play Like a Champion today, and that sometimes plays out, sometimes doesn't. But the quote from Doolittle was, that's impressive, and the way it's prominently displayed in the main buildings.
Well, and I will say, graduating when I did to what I've seen recently and what General Clark has done, there's a vast difference in the support to that exact effort, which is they have built new, we actually there are programs now where cadets fly satellites, live satellites from their classroom that they've built. They've got new aerospace, new nuclear engineering department. There's a lot of new efforts and new money going into doing just that. I mean, the Air Force, with the Space Force being added, which I was, my last base was a Space Command base prior to being Space Force. It's a big part of what the Academy is putting out. I'm very proud of that. And I want to make sure I go back on when I mentioned Purdue and Florida State and the comparisons of a public university to this is strictly you don't interview to leave. You're getting educated at a public university, and you're going to go interview and go out into the world. You have a job when you graduate. You just don't know what it is. So it's just a difference in the mindset of how you're going through this, going, all right, well, I'm here for one reason first, and that is to be an officer in the United States Air Force. What I do becomes secondary. And that again leads back to what I think about in my career is is, well, first and foremost, I'm here to do this. There's a mission, and that's what I've, in this stage in my career, I'm very happy to be able to find that mission again, which is, what is it? What is it we're all here to do? And then what we do about it is kind of secondary. Like, okay, we'll go figure that out, but we all have to have a mission, and that's when it feels really good, to be a part of something like that. And Bob, that's partly being on your advisory board, where how I feel is that's what we're doing, finding that mission. What is Mobius? What are we? What is the goal? And where are we all going? Then we go figure out how to get there. You can't do that if you don't know where it is.
I recall when, and we're going to move off the Air Force Academy and into finance here, which I know everybody's on the edge of their seat to do. Well, I remember when Lisa and I were going to Colorado, and we were anticipating going to the Air Force Academy. The advice you gave us, don't forget to look up. Well, man, I'll tell you what, when we looked up, there was everything going on: gliders, parachuters, helicopters. I mean, there was something going on all the time.
Yeah.
So if my advice is, if anybody's going to go visit that facility, look up. You're on the top of a mountain, but look up.
Yeah. It's
Remarkable place. So you jumped, you got into the what we'll call the private sector. I think the military is the private sector also, but it's heavy public service. And so, by the way, thank you for that. That's something that more people would love to take advantage of, I'm sure, but for whatever reason, get themselves diverted. I went to work in the United States Senate, but public service has always been in my, it's still a part of my DNA. And here at Mobius, and we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. But then you made the jump. You stayed in finance. You stayed close to money. And you made the jump, and you didn't make a small jump. That was another big leap. What led you to get into the hospitality industry and commercial real estate?
Yeah, that was interesting. And you can call it fork in the road, or it was just where things were going. When I finished, I was at Patrick Air Force Base in Cape Canaveral, launching actually back in the shuttle days. So we were launching quite a bit at the time. However, that's quite boring relative to coming from Germany. And one of the things we used to jokingly call our housing the I Dream of Jeannie housing, because if you've ever seen the TV show I Dream of Jeannie, the external shots when they'd come back in from a commercial or in the opening segment was actually Patrick's housing. So that was what, the 60s, early 70s, and that was still the same housing. You could film the same thing when I was there. It was that old. And so we looked at privatizing. You're talking about beachfront, riverfront. I mean, if you ever see where Patrick is located, it's water on both sides. Beautiful land owned by the government, and the government wasn't putting money into it. So I took my background and started building out financial models to help private developers and help the DoD understand how they could work together to lease the land to a developer, let that developer turn that around and lease back to the government through the military housing contracts, because they're paying the person to live there. They should pay the developer and get new housing. So we turned that around. It was the first time that had been done. And at that point, you have a 5-year commitment. I had done what I wanted to do. Now, looking back, there's always different things you may wish you had done, but at that time, I got an offer to leave and go to commercial real estate, and that was 4 months before 9/11. So commercial real estate and 9/11 were not two things that got along very well, and I ended up finding my way to Marriott Vacation Club, which happened to be located just a few blocks away. And that started the 22-year journey.
Now that is an industry that you and I both share in common. And one of the things that I know, because we deploy, I don't know, I hear different numbers, but anywhere from 3 to 6 million surveys a year to measure the satisfaction of the product. And the one thing that we did not experience at all was a dip in the number of transactions. That whole resort industry, the timeshare industry, stayed rather consistent throughout the pandemic, while the rest of commercial real estate just.
Yeah. It is amazing how resilient that this industry is. It really is. And that's another conversation we may have in a moment when I got into investor relations, because that was the biggest struggle. That was probably the most difficult conversation to have, because it was hard to tangibly explain to an investor, someone on Wall Street, why it's so resilient. They couldn't understand it, but it is. And if you look back over time, it just is. Any issues you think about in the industry today are not due to the resiliency of the product. Everybody's got their own challenges right now of growth, but for many different reasons, and none of them really negative. It's the product sells. People want it, people use it, people love it. Unfortunately, the people that maybe don't like it are more vocal than in other industries, but by and large, all the numbers will tell you it's a very, very resilient and very popular product.
Well, if you think back about the way it was originally sold and still in large degrees sold today, they do, it's called a day drive. And so their primary market are those people that live within 90 miles of a resort. And some of those resorts, you think about a resort in Avon, Colorado, and there's not that many people within a 90-mile radius, but those people that live within a 90-mile radius use that product. They use that property, and then they used it for the exchange. Marriott, when they finally did get into the marketplace, they brought in a higher end product. They brought in a higher end clientele. They brought in a younger group of people, and were able to, Marriott was actually one of the few that kept bringing resorts out of the ground, and that was when you were there.
Mm-hmm. You're right, and during that time, this was in the later of the 2000s. Luxury side, the luxury side was growing very quickly, and so I was fortunate to be able to work at RCI with the registry collection, which was their exchange model for luxury fractional type sales for those products, and allowing them to work within a network similar to what the Ritz-Carlton Destination Club did for Ritz-Carlton owners, which led me then back to the Ritz-Carlton Destination Club to be the asset manager for that. So I'm fortunate during that time, and then really fortunate, right, when that decided to slow down a little bit.
Let me get this to where people can see who the heck we are. That's a very nice picture behind you there, my friend. I like that. That's very cool. Okay, so we moved on from, now you did the M&A stuff, right, for Marriott Vacation Club.
Well,
right?
No. Prior to any of that, I had come back to Orlando from RCI and was asset manager for the Ritz-Carlton Destination Club in Hawaii, and we'll call it hardship tour. I look back on my career, and I have been fortunate. My first station in the military was Germany, and my coming back, I was working for Ritz-Carlton in Hawaii. That was tough. We made it work. So back to Orlando quite a bit, trying to help again the earlier comment about all the different parts have to work together, and that's effectively what asset management is. It was well, you got finance, you got sales, you've got construction, you've got partners. We had joint ventures in all of these. Someone has to be kind of quarterbacking all of those relationships with an office in Orlando that's 6 hours ahead, and somewhat forgets a lot of times what's happening that far away. And so asset management was there to bring it all together. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, if we're going to, get philosophical with all of our quotes today, because something might have happened in 2008, 2009 that changed the world, which was the Lehman bankruptcy. And lo and behold, Lehman was our lender for these projects out in Hawaii.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that September of 2008 was a good time. We were well into.
To give people notice.
Oh, they got notice. The world got notice when everyone in New York.
Yeah, they just didn't give you notice.
Yeah. We woke up early that day, and turns out we were spending about $1 million a day with Lehman at the time, and it had to come from somewhere. I'm very proud of what the team did, because somehow, some way, we managed to finish about $180 million of construction relatively on time, and delivered the product that we promised. That didn't mean it wasn't without its issues. There were tremendous issues, because while you built it and while you had people that had purchased ahead of time, you didn't have enough to finish the sales because the world had changed overnight, right?
Curious, did that bring any additional scrutiny from regulators? I mean,
I
I
wouldn't
think it's
say
a difficult
scrutiny.
time,
No,
regulatory standpoint.
no, because these were what we were dealing with were whole ownership residential contracts. So it was
Okay.
real estate contracts. So it was less so on the regulatory side. The issue on the if you think about it from a destination club side, meaning more like the timeshare sale. So if you bought a fraction, which was 3 weeks, you had opportunities to travel, you had opportunities to use it. And it was open. And that was, say $400,000 to $500,000. It was the $6 to $8 million residences where, if you think about 2009, what was the value of that residence? You might have written a contract in 2006 for this thing to be done in 2008, 2009, that the real estate market always goes up. Now all of a sudden you're saying, should I have done that? Well, you have a legal contract. And so this became the battle of, well, if I don't agree with what I signed, and we're saying, well, you signed it, and how far do you go on each side to actually fulfill that contract? It's built, it's there. That's where I think and then it wasn't just in Kapalua in Hawaii. This was all over the world. Contracts were having these issues. So it did get scrutiny from that standpoint.
Well, and in some ways that really helped dramatically shrink but improve the sales process. In the timeshare market at one time, the mantra was, if you could fog a mirror, you could own a timeshare.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the financing, it got very tightened up. And so developers of all kinds were forced to get their own financing. And so they were a little bit more careful about the paper they sold, which I believe they probably still are today. I don't know, but
no, they are. Two things happen. I mean, that's a great point, Bob, because two things happen at this time, right? 2009, 10, you're dealing with all of this. The industry is trying to figure out how do we survive what has been a now real estate driven, mortgage driven recession. That's never happened, or it hasn't happened certainly in our lifetime, probably our parents' lifetime. Then Marriott decides to spin us off. So now you have two issues. One is I need to find sales. I need to determine where my most efficient sale comes from. But now the public market wants to know if that's a healthy sale. So you had to now balance those two things, which is my best sales, are they also my optimum sales for potentially the defaults that can occur in times like this. So maybe the best timing was 2012 to spin off, because you were at the trough. You were at the end of, if you want to think about it that way, of all of this 2009-10 situation, because you'd worked through a lot of that process. Now people are coming back. Now you've had to figure out where your optimum sales are coming from. And now you go out to Wall Street and say, just watch. And that's where I say it was difficult, because they're looking at it going, well, what do you mean watch what? You've had the worst 3 years that timeshares ever had. Like, right, but we're going to prove to you that it is a product that will last. And sure enough, I mean, it certainly did.
Well, you've developed an expertise in one of those areas that every CEO in the galaxy wishes they had, but they don't. And that is the ability to understand and produce a valuation document that's based on reality. How they turn that and spin it is the skill of a good CEO. How they use that information, but the genesis of the information has to come from somebody that knows what the hell they're doing, what they're talking about. So,
Yeah.
Congratulate you. I mean, you do understand. I know how all that works together. And you and I have had conversations, many conversations, and even though it may look like I'm glossing, like I'm, getting a little glossy, I really do pick up what you're telling me, because we have the same conversation 3 or 4 times, and then I finally get it. I appreciate your patience. So then you went back to, we'll call it RCI. RCI formed a company called Panorama.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went to work at Panorama as again, high level, one of the suits to help them build out a company that they purchased called ARN.
Mhm.
And that was a platform, right? I mean, basically that was a big software company.
Yes, yeah. So if you back up right before that, my final one of the final pieces of the puzzle for Marriott, I had been investor relations for 8 years, and if the only one for many years in the industry. And that there was a whole myriad of things we could do a whole other hour talking about what that was like, right? Being taking the valuation tools, thankfully, that I had built, and then explaining to Wall Street investors how to model, right? How do you do this? How do I give you enough information to be a little bit smarter about how this works without giving you inside information, right? Balancing all of that. And spin is a funny word. It's context. I prefer context, right? Because I'm not I'm just trying to make sure you understand what this means so that when you see it again, you don't overreact. So if I spin, then there's a little bit of, well, what does it mean if it goes the other way? And I always try to think about that with a CEO and a CFO. You may really like the story right now, but it's not always going to be that. So be careful with how you spin when it comes back to bite you at the next time when it's not that way. And they say, well, wait, you said it's always like this. I always try to say it's not a sprint, it's not a marathon, it's the never-ending story. Being public is the never-ending story. You will always tell that story again. Make sure you're consistent. So to me, it's context. So the next time it happens, I say, see, that's exactly what I said. It does this, then it does this. That means likely coming back to the other. Again, it can be a pendulum. That helps them understand it better and not overreact to spin. So then during all of that time is the pressure was mounting because Marriott had purchased Starwood. You had this mixed brand now. You had Marriott brands owned by one of our biggest competitors, and we had the Marriott license. That was cleaned up. I'll put it, that way, maybe the simplest way. When Marriott decided, MVW, Marriott Vacations Worldwide, decided to purchase ILG. And so I was working alongside the team and handling the integration efforts, the initial due diligence integration of how do you bring 12,000 employees into a 15,000 employee company to merge two cultures, very different brands, very different leadership. How do you bring all of that together? So when that was completed, I left and to what you'd mentioned, found my way to RCI at the time that was working on the Panorama brand, but they were looking at how do we increase share of wallet with all these exchangers, right? There's millions of exchange members who do other vacations. How do we tap into that? And part of it is, well, let's offer better travel solutions outside of just the timeshare exchange that they have. And they were looking at a company called Alliance Reservations Network and ARN, and they were in the beginning of the due diligence process and asked me to come in and help facilitate the due diligence. And that led to the integration once it was acquired. Now, how do you bring these folks in? Because you've got, at the time, about 50 software developers. I just think about the word developer, always throws me off because I think about developers as building something. Software developers, very different breed. They're phenomenal. They will be the smartest people you will meet. You meet a software developer, they are incredibly smart, and they hierarchy them. Their hierarchical nature is the smartest one, right? They're the exact opposite of what I've said, not in a bad way, but the smartest one in the room, that's who runs the room, because that is how they define their work. Who is the best one at hacking this? Who is the best one at designing the simplest and most efficient code to get you to the answer without code debt? And I learned a ton as a guy who hates changing his password. You and I talked about an hour ago, right? If something on the web, if my bank said, sorry, password not recognized, I'm out. I don't need my money anymore. I don't deal with that.
Well,
now I'm leading.
We actually went 1 week without developers. We had one developer company leave, and they left before we could onboard the next one. And when we mentioned paranoid survive earlier, the paranoid also stay awake at night, believe me, because that that was frightening. It was a very frightening time because
Yes.
anything would
Yes.
have happened. The other thing too, though, as a bit of a mindless, not so mindless as a selfish self-promotion, it did demonstrate the strength of our platform because we didn't need anybody hovering. We thought we did. So
Well,
it
that's how
really
you
helped
find
us.
out, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it really helped us find out. And so, from an operation standpoint and the way the thing is held together, the programmers are the ones that they are measured by their success, and they are measured by not only success, but we measure them by how good they are based on the number of hours it took them to install an innovation of ours or install a parser if we have a new client. Some guys, it takes them 15 minutes, other guys, it could take them 4 hours. And that makes a big difference in our life when they're billing us out at $200 an hour.
Well, and what I learned underneath that as well is what are you doing for that 4 hours? Did you create 2,000 lines of code, or were you able to do it in 50 lines of code? Because that code sits in your platform forever. And eventually that 2,000 lines can become 10,000 lines, can become 20,000 lines of code. Now you make a change and you don't know how far into that code you have to go to fix it. And that was the fight we were having. And that's what I learned so much from that balance, because the folks that we acquired were incredibly good at what they did, but they were also independent, owned by a couple of gentlemen who would rightfully so push the boundaries of what they could do with this platform from a code perspective, to now a large public company that says, time out. That's not how we push code into production. That is not how we design. That is not, and they're saying, wow, you need to understand what today's world is doing with code development. You need to understand you're a dinosaur. And that dinosaur said, that's a dinosaur that makes hundreds of millions of dollars. And to do the fixes you want require things that we don't necessarily want to do right now, right? So if it ain't broke, don't fix it mantra, to the we break things to make them better private company, right? So bringing those two cultures together was I don't know, I slept for a year or two, but man, I had a lot of fun in the fights that would happen, and the being the calm voice in the room trying to say, all right, everybody, right? Because you've got two sets of developers now that want to both be right. And so learned a bunch, had a lot of fun, grew that to over 100 people during that time, and drove, like, well, we could skip the COVID part. Everybody knows COVID stories, but had to survive the COVID days. And once we got past that, I think they're about 3 times the size they were at the acquisition now, maybe more. So
See,
great team.
being the calm voice in the room is not something that I'm known for. So if in our world, there are times when Lisa and Bill will know that we need that non-calm voice in the room, that's when I get invited to meetings. So they invite me to meetings knowing full well that I'm going to get excited about something and I'm going to say something, and otherwise I'm not bothered with it.
That's funny. Well, that's funny you say that, because if you ask folks at ARN, they'll tell you I would tell them I have 2 skills: charm and harsh language. So when we're out of one, we go to the other. So we used a lot of both for a few years. And sometimes one works and sometimes the other works.
That's good.
You got to meet the level of the room sometimes. And passionate group, and loved that work. And then we also rebranded the company during that time with a pretty very different kind of forward-looking license deal, which was acquiring Travel and Leisure name for Wyndham at the time. That's now Travel and Leisure, and you can see all the great things that they're doing with the new license, the new name. So a lot of great things during that time.
A good leader.
Yes. So I look back, and I think I mentioned to you earlier this morning, like when you get asked to walk through your career, it doesn't happen very often, and you have to stop and think, and it's fun. It's interesting to look back and say, well, where were these things that at the time you didn't know was a fork in the road, and you go say, boy, that's a moment. And so I appreciate kind of getting to think back through some of these and walk through them, because this leads me to the last one. What I thought you'd also say, General Clark said a couple of years ago, I had a tremendous opportunity. I was asked I just got an email saying, hey, would you like to come see General Clark speak at Seasons 52 on Sand Lake Road. And I was like, well, I live about 200 yards from Seasons 52. So yeah, I think I might pop over. And I got to have lunch with him. And one of the things that he said, and it resonated because it's the way that my career has gone, is never let a good crisis go to waste. And I will tell every team I have that. It will go wrong. Everything that I've been a part of, and I'll say this with pride, something has gone wrong. And write a book if you've got a career that nothing has ever gone wrong. Please write that book. I would buy that. And
That would be a boring book.
It'd be a fiction, right? It would be in a different section of the bookstore. So but what's what you do with it, right? Like you have to learn from it. You have to pick up and make it right. Like getting through getting through Lehman, getting through the acquisitions, nobody looks back at integration and said, hey, very few look back and say, boy, that went really well. That's exactly how we're going to do it next time. You just don't, because you can't possibly guess where the next turn is going to take you. What the next issue is going to be. The best you can do is plan for it and have the right team, because something will happen. Don't let it go to waste. Learn from it.
Well, in the back of your mind, never be reticent to bet on yourself. It doesn't matter at what level you are, if you're an employee or an entrepreneur like me, you better be prepared. You need to be prepared. You need to be resigned to betting on yourself. So that, to me, that's
you're my Jiminy Cricket. You sit on my shoulder and say that, and I appreciate that, because you have been a North Star for that, for me, especially for the last couple of years on doing that. And I appreciate that.
I'm glad to hear that. I hope it works out.
I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, please do. So we're going to move it on now, if you don't mind, to the part that I always really do enjoy, and that is
Hello.
There we go.
Oh, okay.
Charities of choice. We, as you may know, on our website, we have a special area called Sharing is Caring, where we feature the charities of the people that were on the BobCast and also our clients. So this, as one of your charities of choice, will go on the website. Gleaners is, I don't know if Gleaners is national or not national, but here in Indianapolis, they enjoy like the highest of reputations, because it's not one of those charities with high, heavy top end, big CEOs. It's people that are really committed. It really is a group of citizens that operate this thing. And you and Kath, you volunteer for this quite a bit, don't you?
Yes. Kath especially. I wish if I was here more. When I'm in Indiana, we would go. We went this last Saturday, and I will tell you, it's humbling to volunteer there on a Saturday morning. Sometimes in the winter, it's really cold, and so you're standing outside loading up sometimes 2,000 cars with food, and they do it every single Saturday in 2 different locations in Indianapolis. And if you want to work, it's a lot of work, but you feel really good when you're done. But as I mentioned, it's you're going to wish you could do it more and more, because it's unfortunate how many folks that you end up helping and how many folks need it. So Gleaners is a wonderful organization, and they're well run. Like I said, we went Saturday, we were working back of house in the warehouse, sorting and loading. I think we ended up doing 7,000 pounds is what they ended up telling the team in 3 hours.
And they distribute that how?
So while we were in the warehouse, there's a team in what they call the pantry, which is a drive-through location and just next to the warehouse indoors, that they just line the cars up, and what they do is they have stations that are different types of foodstuffs, right? So you've got milk typically at the front. Yeah, you got your milk and some beverages, and then it's potatoes, other types of vegetables, but you've got them all loaded on pallets separately with teams, and the cars come through with their trunks open or their side doors open, and your station just loads up the food and they keep driving. And again, in about 3 hours, that team probably did 2,000 cars, somewhere around between 1,000 and 2,000 cars on a Saturday morning. There's another location, or there used to be, I'm not sure if they still operate both right now, on the east side of town, that's all outside. And that's when I say that can get cold, but well worth it. So I would encourage
You said
not
we're
just
gonna
to
have,
go and donate, but to donate your time. Your time is the most important thing for them.
is there one in Orlando?
No, I don't believe. I think Gleaners, the one that I've worked with in Orlando is a veteran food bank, so that it's the veterans register that are eligible, and they do the same thing. You line up in the set up the exact same way, and I'll get that name for you. But Gleaners is regional. I think it's Indiana and Michigan.
Okay. Well, this link here where it says Home Gleaners, that's a link to contribute, to donate. And I know it works because I was there this morning and gave them $50 as a way of thanking you for your time. But like
Thank you,
the
Bob. I
original,
appreciate that.
like
Yeah.
my
I said
pleasure.
thank you. Yeah, I know they appreciate it too.
Believe me, it's my pleasure. And so like as Ron Popeil would say when he came out with the very first Fish-O-Matic, but wait, there's more. Jeff has blessed us with a second charity that is also near and dear to his heart. And this one has to do with veterans. You know, we always see a veteran and we say, thank you for your service. And I don't know if a veteran really knows what to say to that. You know, you're welcome. Or, but I think it would be great if a veteran said, hey, you're welcome. Now I want you to go here and throw some money at it because this is where the rubber really meets the road. And organizations like this, the Hero Company, which it provides sheltered dogs, right? I mean, and you contribute and you have a bracelet, right?
Multiple, yes. And it's funny when what you said a second ago made me think, because I wear my Air Force hats and my Air Force shirts a lot, and it's because that's my football team. And I think I should have remembered the score when we beat Notre Dame about 10 years ago, but it was a good one. Yeah, beat them pretty bad. So I wear my stuff because it's my football team, but I tend to get that a lot, and people say thank you for your service, and my response is always my pleasure. And my wife will say sometimes, is that what you're supposed to say? I don't know, but it was absolutely my pleasure. It's 9 years, and those are the best friends that you can make. That's the best work you can do, and I don't regret a minute. And there are days where I wish that I'd done more, many days. So my pleasure is the easiest response for me, but everyone's going to give you something different, and everyone went through something different. And this is definitely a passion for me that I'm working on ways now to do even more for. But the Hero Company, as well as another new one called Till Valhalla, and that they do is all the proceeds from the Hero Company merchandise goes to supply therapy dogs to veterans. And you laugh anymore when you see people at the airport trying to get peacocks onto planes and all this other stuff. When you see one of these dogs, they are very different than what people try to take around and put a vest on. These dogs are providing life-saving, not just therapy, but support to these veterans. And Till Valhalla, which is a separate one, is working to stave off the 22 a day, which is veterans who take their own life every day, and they want to get that number down to 0, but we certainly don't want it to be 22. So those are things, if you can take a look, you can donate directly. I prefer to buy the bracelets. They've got a ton of different types of merchandise: shirts, bracelets, necklaces, things like that, hats. So I like getting the merchandise. So people ask, I can tell them. All my friends have them, and so I like to buy them and just give them out and let them know why and what that bracelet means. So thank you for that time too, Bob. Just getting to promote that is a good opportunity.
Well, charities of choice for people are always personal. And so from my standpoint, bringing that personal feeling, that personal thought, and that personal emotion out into the world, it's a little bit that I can do. I can always do more, but this is a part of what I like to do and prefer to do. So thank you for the shout out for both of these charities. You brought the Hero Company in to me a little bit late, so I'll make sure I go back in there and drop another $50 bill, which is going to be my pleasure, believe me.
No, you'll have a bracelet soon, so you can wear your support.
Well, maybe we can have lunch at some point here real soon. So this is how you reach Jeff Hansen. and this is who Jeff Hansen is, although this doesn't tell the story. What tells the story is the last hour of the conversation that we had. Jeff is one of the finest people I've ever met. I've ever had the pleasure of having a glass of wine with. And so if you're looking for that really high end consultant, you might want to reach out to Jeff. And otherwise, he'll always have a glass of wine with you, I'm sure. I really appreciate your time, Jeff. This has been a lot of fun, and I know we're going to get together. Are you going to the race this weekend?
I am not. Two very, very close friends of mine from the academy, ironically, are flying in, and we are doing a bourbon trail in Louisville.
Oh, you're not even going to be in town.
No, we'll come back on Sunday and probably go near there to see if we can watch some of it. But I'll be in Louisville.
Well, give me a holler. Come on by. We'll probably be on the deck drinking sarsaparilla.
Been known to do that, Bob. I probably will.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that was a tremendous compliment. And for those of you who don't know Bob, he knows 2 or 3 people, I think. So to be one of those 3, that's quite an accomplishment. So thank you.
You're welcome, my friend. It's always a pleasure.
It was also nice to introduce you to all those people at ARTA this year as your first ARTA. So congratulations on that.
That's right. Rookie of the year, right?
Right.
I think I've been to 40 of them. I really do. I mean, I'm trying to count back, but I think I've been to 40 ARTA conventions. I don't remember missing one.
That is there needs to be an award for that. Someone tell Jason.
They call it the Lifetime Achievement Award, but I would have to decline that because there are people that have had way greater impact than me. Way greater.
See, there you go. You're living up to how we started this whole conversation, and that was not planned to circle back to don't be the smartest person in the room. Look at you, Bob.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, I think about some of the people that you worked with. I mean, Bob Miller, Ed McMullen, some of the people. I remember a very close mutual friend of yours and mine, Laney Kane Hannon, who's now the CEO of One, was featured in an ARTA magazine article as a Chairman's League member. They asked her the question: if you were stuck on a private island, who would you want on that island with you? And her answer was Bob Miller and Ed McMullen Jr., because if they could talk Marietta into being in the timeshare, they could get out of anything.
That's funny.
True, too. I knew both those guys. I know Bob Miller very well and knew Ed McMullen very well, rest his soul.
Yes. So, and you're right about that. I could name a bunch, and certainly most recently, or spending a lot of my career around and working with closely Steve Wise and John Geller. And watching Mike Brown grow through his career to where he is. I think when I was at Marriott Vacations, well before it had spun off or I had gotten into asset management, he had just come back from the UK and was in Marriott in the Caribbean. But and see where he's gone. There's been there's a lot of folks in this industry that I've gotten to work around and for, and it's been a really, really wonderful 22 years. So I'm looking forward to the next chapter too. What the next one?
Me too. I'm going to stop the recording, my friend. Thank you very much. Hang on
for
a bit.
Bob.
We'll put a wrap to this whole thing. And
well, it was my pleasure and honor, Bob. I really do. This was neat. This is fun to get to do this and just kind of wax philosophical about my history, and I appreciate the opportunity.